morning, good evening, wherever you may be around the city and across the state. Coming to you from the heart of Chicago, it is E-Learning with Mr. Moller. And on today's show, we're going to dig a little bit into sociology, study of groups and cultures. This is continuing our discussion of the social sciences. So let's talk about sociology. Sociology is one of my favorite subjects because it's the study of society. It's how we live together, it's how we communicate, it's how we do all these things. And so sociology deals with the concept of ordered universes, or in other words, how do you make sense of the world around you? The world is a crazy place, right? And so things like religion, traditions, languages, values, music, literature, art, our sense of community. These things all kind of tell us who we are in the society, what our goals should be. And so in a lot of ways, this is how we make sense of the kind of confusing reality of living in the world. And so we talk about sociology, we talk about culture a lot. And culture is a design for living, basically plans, recipes, rules, norms. If we think about culture, it encapsulates just about everything that has to do with the development of a sense of identity and how that identity is going to affect the actions that we are going to take. And so symbols are a very, very big piece of this, as is language. But to start off, I just want to talk a little bit about a fond cultural memory that I have. So when I was young and my mom was not always around when she was working, we would have tacos. And this was really kind of great for me as a kid because this was something that I could cook. And so I would take out the beef and the seasoning and I would, cook it and I would, heat up the taco shells, and we would sit down and we'd have this lovely Taco Tuesday with my mother, Ma Burns. And so that's one of the warmest childhood memories that I have. And yet I can feel the heat. I can feel you reaching through the screen to strangle Mr. Moller, because of course you're going to say, those aren't real tacos. Those are white people tacos. I'm offended by you calling them tacos. I've been doing this for years, and this is probably the most upset that you guys will get at me the entire year. And so you reflexively, when you saw those pictures of those crunchy shell beef tacos with lettuce and tomato, you reflexively said, those are not tacos. And by doing that, you've actually stumbled upon one of the most important things to remember in studying cultures. And that's the idea of ethnocentrism. Ethno meaning ethnic, centrism meaning centric. And this is the idea that everyone does this. Individuals and groups will automatically judge other cultures against their own with the assumption of the superiority of your culture. Mr. Moore, those are not real tacos. And so ethnocentrism is something that's very, very common. Everybody does it because you assume that whatever your culture is, that it is the best, and also that it is the normal, that everything should be judged against. So if we're looking at like ethnocentrism in history and American culture, I can give you a few examples to kind of drive this home. The first is the idea of like speak American, meaning speak English. The assumption that English is a superior language to know in the United States. This has been around since the founding of the country really as British colonies, but kind of something really interesting is my last name. You guys would all say my name, Moller, M-O-L-L-E-R. But when my relatives on my father's side came, the name was actually Möller with an umlaut over the O. And so in order to become more Americanized, in order to kind of fit into the ethnocentric view of Germans, my name is pronounced differently and was changed. And so when we talk about things like names and pronunciations, it's very, very big. And in fact, those things can actually erase culture as much as they can signal it. Another great idea is American exceptionalism, that, the American government is the most enlightened. We see this in our movies, right? Americans are always the hero. It's the American way. But in a lot of ways, we also look at who and what gets to be American, right? Is American, meaning diversity? Is to be American meaning loving baseball? And so in a lot of ways, kind of we fight about what is American culture, and then also how should we judge kind of other cultures. So a couple of definitions just to kind of kick off our study of social groups. Basically, a group is just a number of people that have something in common. It can be something very, very close, like a family, or it can be something very loose, like White Sox fans that all go to the stadium. And so every group, whether it be school, whether it be the country or the city, there are always roles and there are always norms that are associated with being a part of a group. If you went to a White Sox game, you wouldn't necessarily wear, a Minnesota Vikings t-shirt. You would want to fit in with the norm of being a fan. So when we talk about roles, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson used to say often, know your role, and that's covered up by my face, but the meme's there. And your role is really simple. It's just your place within the group. A teacher, student, principal, if we're looking at schools, mother, father, oldest, youngest, when we look at a family. And so the norms are what is considered normal, the behaviors that are expected to kind of come along based upon what what role you are in the group. So for instance, you guys expect me to have a class prepared for you, to maybe give you detentions, I don't know. And your norms are do your assignments, pay attention, not chew gum. And so a really important part of acting normal, of doing the norm, what is expected, is actually, yes, knowing your role within the society. Sometimes we choose our roles, and sometimes those roles are kind of put upon us by society or kind of any number of people. So if we look at like a family, roles could be the parent, an oldest to middest youngest child, a cousin, an aunt or uncle. And so norms are different depending on your role. So if you're the oldest, you probably know that the norm is to be the most responsible, take care of your younger siblings, and set a good example. If you're a younger child, you probably don't feel the pressure of those norms to be responsible because you are the youngest. And so when we think about this, it's kind of just another way of starting to analyze these things that we've been looking at and been a part of our entire lives. And so culture also is a lot about values. So a value is a belief that guides actions and judgments. So a belief is a belief. I can believe that the grass is purple, but I'm not going to live my life any differently because of that view. But a value belief like honesty or loyalty or equality or religion, these things affect my day-to-day behavior. If I believe in honesty, if that's my value, then I will not lie. And that will change my behavior. Even if lying would be preferable, I would still tell the truth. And so symbols really go along with values in that it's really anything, whether it be a flag, a painting, just an image, an idea that kind of has a specific meaning to a group. And most symbols are wrapped up in value statements. If you look at our school, La Virgen de Guadalupe, she is our symbol. She stands for everything that this school stands for, its values, its culture, and so that is one of the most prominent symbols that we use to remind us of what our values are. And at all Jesuit high schools, we share those same values, and the symbol of those, and it's the grad at grad. And the symbol of that is when we announce the awards at the end of the year and give out the plaques for man and woman for others, because in every Jesuit school, the values, the beliefs that we hope will affect your decision making, your actions, are really that grad at grad. So symbols, though, they don't stay the same. The swastika is actually one of the oldest and most popular symbols in human history, at least until the 1930s. So the Sanskrit swastika shows up just about everywhere in history, but when the Nazis took this very popular, recognizable symbol, tilted it, and made it their flag, they completely changed the meaning of it. Now you cannot see a swastika anywhere and not think about the Nazi Party in Germany. But that wasn't always the case. These are American teams. One is a basketball team, one is a women's hockey team, and the swastika was actually a very, very popular emblem for amateur sports teams and for everything else. And so always be aware that symbols may change over time. So when you look at a symbol, you have to ask yourself, what did it mean at the time that you're looking at the symbol? Very important. Also, too, people can be symbols. You can hold up somebody like a Cesar Chavez or a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Malcolm X and say that they represent kind of a movement, an idea, something bigger than themselves. Barack Obama leaned into this heavily with his Hope campaign, kind of taking a similar cue from John F. Kennedy, who kind of became a symbol for his generation as the youngest man elected president since Teddy Roosevelt. And so people can be symbols. And we can actually turn those people into national myths. The way that we talk about Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King Jr. rarely has anything to do with the actual people that they were, the choices they made, the doubts they had, because we as a society have just decided that these figures represent for us something important, something that we want to remember and hold up. And so people can become symbols in history, kind of aside from their actual historical life. And so when we look at culture, everything from popular culture to fine arts, culture is a reflection. It is the way that a society views itself and its values, and more importantly, it's how a society wants to view itself in any particular era. And so if we ask ourselves, like, what is the value represented by the popularity of Michael Jordan sneakers? Well, it's been the same as everything that Michael Jordan has put his name on. Michael Jordan stands not for the Bulls or for Chicago, but for winning. And so having the pair of Jordans means that I am a winner. And because winning is important in the society, Jordans are important in the society. And so culture forms how we think about the world. And how we think also creates culture. And so if we look at our media, if we look at kind of the albums that are out there, video games, social media, People Magazine, whatever kind of, blogs you guys follow, whatever YouTube influencers, when you look at them, that is what you normalize. That is what you assume is to be so. When People Magazine puts out its list of the most beautiful people, they're making up a list. But we read it, we think about it, and we internalize those as the standards of beauty in the American society. Cristo Rey, being here, our culture forms how you think. I've been here a long time, and my experiences have fundamentally shaped how I view the world. And that's no accident, because the culture around us forms us. But also, how we think is going to form culture as well. And so we get movies like D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, which stars the Ku Klux Klan. Of course, it was made in the 19-teens. You never have a movie like that today. The Great Gatsby represents kind of the 1920s ennui, feeling of kind of hopelessness. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was one of the first movies that featured an interracial couple. Dora the Explorer, being a very popular kids show learning Spanish, means that kind of a lot of people are opening up their minds to this idea of other cultures. And so how we think can always form the culture around us. And so in sociology, we look at groups. We look at how they interact. We look at what that culture produces, and we ask a couple of really key questions. And arguably, something that we are still very much fighting about this year is, what is this American culture, and how does it change? And then finally, perhaps the most important, what are American values, and how do we live up to them? And so it's just a friendly reminder to go into your activity packet and do some thinking about culture and how it influences your life.